Justin, any requests?
Can I play your guitar?
Through Wonderwall. I'm a good singer. Can I sing with you?
Oh, give us another. Come on, mate. One more song.
One more song. One more song. One more song. One more song. One more song. One more song. One more song. One more song. One more song. One more song. One more song. One more song. One more song. One more song. One more song. One more song.
Hello, welcome to the One More Songcast. I've still got my shades on my head actually, I'm going to take them off. How are we doing? We've got our fourth guest on this afternoon, and it's another local legend. We call Chris Healy a local legend, but I think a lot of people know Justin from his guitar tuition. Obviously, he's a multi-instrumentalist as well. It's Justin Crowe on the podcast today. How are we doing, Justin? You all right?
Yeah, good.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
So it's weird because I've known you quite a long time. I used to have lessons with you, and then I came back and had lessons with you. Don't know too much about you. We talk about gigs and we talk about this and that, but obviously there's a lot to be learnt from you today. We always start our podcast with, what does music, just the term music, mean to you? It's a very broad question, but it's an opener.
Well, it is. I mean, music's been my life, really. I know it's probably easy to say that, and everyone says that, but I mean, I've been playing since I was 9, I think. I've been listening to music since as long back as I can remember.
Yeah.
And just gigging and playing, and the people I've met, the places I've been, that music it's taken me to places that just everything about that is I don't actually know what I'd be doing if I wasn't gigging and playing, and that's
especially
I can't imagine what I'd be doing without it.
So it's everything to you, really, isn't it? So obviously, where did it all begin? So first of all, like, where did you grow up, and what was being played around your house when you was a youngster and that kind of thing? What did you have musical family members as well?
Yeah, well, I was born in Farrington, Leyland, and I grew up in the 70s when I was sort of my dad was concert secretary of 3 social clubs in Leyland and Farrington at the time. And in them days, what used to do, the concert secretary would go around and look for acts. There weren't agents. I'm going back to the 70s now, early 70s, late 70s. And he was always looking for acts, and he was great. He would go out all over different clubs all over and find, book different acts and that. And we're also looking for organists and drummers, So he was always keen for me to get into music and play, and so I started learning organ and that, And that's what really got me into music. But at the time, we were always a family. We were always listening to the top 40 on Sunday on radio. There's a lot of people did in them days. That's all we really listened to, and also the records, the music. So although my dad wasn't actually musical as such, my dad, but he was always around music, around music acts and booking acts.
Yeah, he was almost like a talent scout.
Basically, because he would go around and book all the acts himself, for the clubs.
Yeah.
He was very busy. He was very, very busy like that.
Yeah, it's a good way to do it, isn't it? You know what you're getting then for pubs.
I always remember every night from sort of 5 o'clock till 7 or 8 o'clock, he'd be on the phone in hallway. Our phone was in the hallway. He'd be on phone constantly for like 3 hours every night,
booking stuff. So did you ever go with him to see acts and stuff as he was booking?
Well, I was young then. I'm going back like in the 70s. I mean, I was born in 69, so this is my early years before I started learning really. And it was about 1980 when I started actually learning. But that's my first sort of memories of music around the house. And my brother's 8 years older than me, and he's a drummer as well, so he was playing drums.
Cool.
I always remember my dad saying, they're always looking for organists. You'll always have work if you play organ around clubs and that.
Absolutely.
So where did that turn into, I love these records that I'm listening to with my mum and dad and everything, to, my brother's playing drums. Right, where did that mean, I want to learn music, I want to learn an instrument here?
Well, originally, we were always listening to music. And then it was around about 1978, something like that, because there was the music at the time. All we was doing is like at school we were learning like all things bright and beautiful and things like that. Sat cross-legged in the hallway. Didn't really do anything for me. So it was all really at home that it did it. And then I remember Buzzcocks did Ever Fall in Love with Someone. I thought, oh, I love that track. I love the Buzzcocks. I'm really into Buzzcocks because it was different. It was edgy. It was not that I'm particularly into punk, but I love the rawness and the melody of that. And so then it was like 79 when I sort of started wanting to learn. And of course, mum and dad were really behind me then to start learning. So I started learning organ, that, you know, and I was starting playing the guitar a bit then as well. But it was mainly organ. And so that was it really. And then I started listening to different bands. So that's kind of the point where I thought of, got into music, you know.
Definitely, yeah.
Something that I like personally, rather than that.
Absolutely.
My parents was listening, you know.
That's quite a contrast to Buzzcocks and all things bright and beautiful.
Well, exactly, you know. I mean, like, there's nothing for it. Then you go on Sunday night and you'd hear Buzzcocks on radio. Wow, you know.
So how did that go from? So obviously, if you started in '78, in music, were you doing it at school and stuff as well then?
Not really. No, I had private tuition actually.
Right,
Bob Singleton, he was an organist actually at the clubs. He was a really, really good organist, multi-instrument, you know, and he had his own big bands, his jazz bands, and so I had private tuition actually, you know, all right through from being nine, well, right through till 17 or 18 really, when I started getting in bands myself. But he really taught me a lot, and that's where I would learn to read and that, you know, organ pedals and all that, you know, and reading and that, and it was good, you know, because that's what he did. He worked in clubs, you know, and that was his.
He knew the standard as well, I suppose.
And it was like, you know, that's a sort of. He was a big influence on me, really, you know.
So how did you find trying to read 4 lines at once, or was it 3 on the organ?
It was funny if it was 2 and the bass pedals.
Yeah.
But when I started, because I didn't actually read, I started to learn to read bass and treble and bass, but because my legs weren't long enough, they couldn't reach the bass pedals. So it was like about 3 or 4 years before I started moving on to bass pedals, you know. So once my toes could reach, you know. But,
so how did that then go? Do you remember your first gig? So obviously you're getting private tuition. What then? Was there something that then motivated you to actually go out and gig yourself? And how did that first experience go? Do you remember your first ever?
I do remember my first gig actually. I was in a band before that, the Redeemers we were called, and there was like, we were schoolmates. We were about 16 and 17, literally left school and got we were like a garage band, but we didn't really do any gigs. We did our own material, but we didn't really do any gigs. But then I joined a band called Crazy Train, and they were gigging sort of 2 or 3 nights a week around Liverpool. And,
nice.
And my first gig was I think it was a nightclub called Brannigan's. It wasn't in the central Liverpool, I'm not sure where it were, but I was that nervous. And I'd only just joined the band sort of a couple of weeks before, playing keyboards, you know, and I didn't really have a proper amp or anything. Nobody could hear it. And there was a couple of songs I had to mime because I didn't have time to learn them, but I was literally thrown in at the end. But because I'd learnt to read, you know, I could read things, but as soon as the music was taken away, I was like, right, I've got to like memorise chords and memorise lines, and that I found really difficult actually, so that's why I was nervous.
So did that first gig go well then? Did it obviously push you on to then obviously?
Well, it did actually. It was the first couple of gigs. I do remember that first gig, and the second gig probably wasn't as good as the first. But then, you know, within a few gigs, I sort of got into it. And I sort of enjoyed it, and then bought better equipment. You know, with that.
Definitely,
I think that is second gig syndrome, because I think I always say the second gigs I've ever done with any band have never gone as well as the first one. It just seems to be the way, doesn't it? I think. So obviously now you're teaching guitar as well. So do you play guitar in bands as well? And when did you first pick up a guitar?
I started playing probably started playing acoustic really when I was probably 11 or 12, something like that. Not long after I'd started learning, you know. But yes, I play acoustic now. I've played guitar, electric guitar in bands before. But I just love the acoustic, you know, at the moment.
Absolutely,
and that's sort of where
So what were you listening to then to inspire that?
Well, after sort of being into Buzzcocks and that and getting into it, in sort of 93, it was quite a barren period, I thought, like up to 93, like the early 90s. There wasn't much guitar going on. And then my favourite band were like the Smiths, really, and Johnny Marr. And I heard them in What Difference Does It Make, I think, was the first song I heard. And I thought, wow, I was proper into the Smiths, and Johnny Marr really were like, and that were it. And I was like learning all that. All them.
So if you was born in '69, then that's the same age as my dad. My dad were very much like into like the Jam and well, the Who more 60s, aren't they? But a lot of these punk bands like Johnny Rotten and all that. Punk was probably quite big when you were growing up, weren't it?
I think so, but for me, it's like when I was in secondary school, I think the Smiths were like also the backdrop to my being in secondary school. It was like the backdrop of me, so like all the things you go through when you're in secondary school, like it just relates to, and that's the backdrop for me. But obviously I'd like the Beatles and bands like that, but they were sort of before my time, really. I didn't sort of grow up with those sort of bands.
So you sort of grew up in that weird post-punk era where it went to half really cheesy pop in the 80s to all these new wave bands that were half dance bands, half guitar bands.
That's right, exactly, you know, and like, I probably liked Adamant and that, and like in 82, but it was, after punk, it was just a really sort of weird sort of period in music until sort of like the indie bands, like say, started in 83, 84 onwards, and then it sort of became the 80s then.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you say you went to uni as well?
No, I just had sort of private lessons. That's the only lessons I had, you know.
So what was it like gigging around Liverpool in the early days then? Was the music scene a lot more vibrant than it is now, or?
Well, it was mainly clubs that I did, the club circuit that I did, and I'm going to sort of late 80s now. Funnily enough, everybody was into the 60s then in the clubs and that. But yeah, and I sort of, it was all the work that we did, all the gigs that we did when I was sort of starting off was all around sort of the outskirts of Liverpool, around Merseyside, basically, you know, and that was through different agents, you know.
Nice.
And that's sort of where I learnt my trade, really.
Absolutely.
So how did you end up getting into, I believe you played like the Cavern, you got started to play
so what happened after the 80s, I was in a duo then, and we did a lot of like 10-night runs up in the northeast. We stopped in Spennymoor and we did a few 10-night runs down in South Wales, and that's when I went full time. Because we were doing sort of like four 10-night runs in the northeast and 4 in South Wales a year, and then we did some runs to Germany doing army bases and, you know, over there. I don't even know if they still do that. I don't even know if they do the 10-night runs there, but there was so many clubs in the northeast that you could literally do one every night. Still, you know, there's so many.
Your granddad talks about playing in like holiday. I mean, he was probably a little bit before you in his sort of prime playing, but he's obviously all the holiday camps like the Pontins and Butlins.
In '96 I did a summer season in Prestatyn. And Prestatyn Zone, you know, where they did the holiday on the buses. I don't know if you've seen the holiday on the buses, where that's where it was set apparently, Pontins at Prestatyn. But yeah, I did a summer season there in a duo. That was interesting, you know. One of the jobs I had to do, which was a tricky job really, is I had to do the kiddies talent competitions. So and they would do it on the Friday, but on the Monday or Tuesday, I think it were, in the afternoon at dinner time, all the kids would come up and they'd want to sing the songs, and you know, and in the height of the season, it could be like you could have a line of about 20 children, you know, all wanting, and so like, little Amy wants to sing, you know, Twinkle Twinkle Little Sweet, listening, and quickly getting the key, quickly getting the key, you know. And of course, sometimes, you know, the children, they'll get on mic and they'll belt it out in any key, you know. And then, but it's you that looks bad, you know. Parents are coming over saying, you can sing a lot better than that. I think, well, you know, and that's where I learned a lot doing that, you know. And it was
having to change keys
quickly learn the keys, you know. So it was tricky. I enjoyed it. It was challenging, but that was kind of good.
So we wanted to keep this first section mainly to your early experiences, and as you were going, and as we move on to the next part, we're going to talk a little bit about obviously the bigger gigs that you've gone on to do with the Anthology, the Beatles, playing with the Monkees and the rest. Did your dad get you into his club then, playing as you were getting a little bit more?
No, not really. To be fair, he got me into that sort of mindset of playing, and that's what really influenced me to be playing the clubs. And like I say, I was in the Bank Tracer chain that was doing the clubs. I did a couple of organist spots. I think it was at Lee Labour Club, was it?
Oh yeah.
So I did a little spell there. But I just wanted to get out gigging and being in bands, you know.
Absolutely,
so I'd got that experience really, and it was invaluable when I was probably about 18, 19, you know. They were the 2 years that because we were out every week, you know, when you're out every week, 2-3 nights, so you pick things up really quick than you do just sat around at home or in a garage playing, you know what I mean? You know.
Was it easy to form? I imagine it was quite easy to form bands around then, wasn't it? But I suppose you didn't have maybe the contact that you'd have now on forums and stuff to actually bring people together.
Yeah, I think. Well, when I was at school, I did my O level at school, and there was only four of us that was into music in our year. I think we had a cornet player and a trumpet player and a flutist, and I was keyboard player. And I don't think of much of a band to me with all those people, you know. So it was like after I left school, there was a couple of mates that I didn't realise played, but they did play. Then there was in my year, and we sort of got together. But again, at that time, we don't know anyone. You know, I knew my brother was in a band. My brother's like 7-8 years older than me, and he was in bands. It was a band called Force 9, I think, around about that time. And I sort of looked up to those, you know, so I kind of aspired to be like in these bigger bands.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
But then as you start playing in bands, you start meeting people, and it's like you ask about what does music mean to me, you know, and a lot of it's the people you meet along the way. You meet so many people, and then as you start meeting people, you start playing, then people get to know what you're doing, then you get yourself out there, and then you're out. But no, I don't think it was. I didn't think it was easy to form bands then, because like you say, you've got all your social media and that now. If the world's a lot smaller.
Definitely,
So with there being gigs on, like a lot of the time 7 nights a week, you could go into Preston. Probably there was we had Lee Jones talking a few weeks ago, and he was saying like you could go to a string of pubs down Church Street in Preston. And every one of them had to have a band. So was there any sort of like jam nights or anything like that was going on to be able to meet musicians? Or
I'm not sure there was. I mean, what I remember about that, again about now, going back about 1980, I remember going to Lamb for the first time in Preston, which is it's no longer a pub. But I remember going there and meeting. I played there a few times, but you're meeting. That was the sort of place to meet. Fellow musicians, and that, you know, that was the sort of where you met people. I think there's a place called the Unicorn as well that had sort of open mics and things like that. I never actually went to any, but sometimes I would travel up from Farrington up to Preston, you know, get the bus up there or you know whatever, and go and watch the bands, because they had something on every night. You know, I think there's a place, Joplin's next door, the King's Arms next door. I think they had bands on pretty much every night of the week, you know. But that's where that was the social gathering of where
absolutely.
all those sort of musicians went, you know, in Preston.
Should we call it there for a quick break?
Yeah, I think we better add, just in case we get cut off again.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll move on to some of your bigger gigs in the next part. Cheers, Justin. See you shortly.
Thank you.
How you doing? It's me, the legend that is. I'd just like to take a little bit of time out of the episode to promote a certain music shop that I've had really good experience with. So it is Blackstone Music, and it's located in Heskin Shopping Village. Chris Bannister there has been really helpful to me. I had trouble a couple of years ago buying from a sort of commercial superstore one of my acoustic guitars. So I went to Chris and ended up getting a completely new guitar. Ever since, he's helped me with, you know, fixing bits and bats on the guitar, and he's just a really helpful, friendly guy who's always got the time of day for you with music-related questions and stuff like that. So big shout out to Blackstone Music. As I said, it's in Heskin Shopping Village. Go and have a look at it. They've got some great stuff there and some great service. Back to the episode. Right. Hello, welcome back to the One More Songcast. We're into part 2. So Justin, you're now getting into your sort of mid-20s, early 20s. Mm-hmm. How did it change from being in these bands and gigging to then going on to some of the bigger stages that you managed to get to?
Well, I think what happened is I was playing in Preston in a band called The Commitments. So the Commandments, actually. There was 10 of us in the band, but we were a Commitments tribute band. And so I was playing a lot more in Preston and that. And then there's like Gary Gibson who's from Preston, and the bass player Chris, a mate of mine, had seen me playing, and they were looking for a keyboard player for a Beatles tribute sort of band. I thought, well, that's all right, you know. But I was busy at the time. I was doing duos and doing other things at the time. And he rung me up, and sort of by the end of the conversation, he'd sort of convinced me that this would be a really good thing, you know, it'd be good to do, because they had good work, and they had work abroad, and they were doing like little tours here and there. They were going to Israel and Brazil and all sorts of things, and it was like really exciting. I thought it was really sort of exciting. So I literally spent weeks just learning Beatles stuff, all keyboard parts and stuff like that. And then the first gig I did, one of the first gigs I did with them was at the Beatles convention in Liverpool, International Beatles convention. That would be about 1997, something like that. And then it went, and that's really where it started, where we were doing like sort of theatres, started doing theatres and travelling abroad a lot. And I was into travelling. I love travelling, you know. Yeah. So that's pretty much where it sort of started, where sort of getting involved in the Beatles sort of stuff in Liverpool and the Cavern Club and that.
So were you full time before this? As a musician?
Yeah, I was pretty much doing a bit of teaching, mainly gigging and that. And I probably started when I, you know, in the 90s really, when I going back to when we started doing that, the 10-night runs and that. And then I did in 93, I think I did some work on a Stena cruise, the summer season, that. So it was sort of seasonal work, you know, that I'd been doing. In 96, like I said, I'd done Prestatyn and that. And so it was good to do, and it was we had a laugh. Absolutely, it was a good band. It was good fun, you know.
So obviously you get presented with that prospect. Was it? I suppose you've got plenty of experience behind it at this point. Was it a daunting prospect, or were you just like, oh wow, this is exciting?
No, I was like, how old would I be there? 27. I was like well into it, you know. It wasn't daunting. I was like, you know, I'd rehearsed all the bits, done all the bits, and about learning curves as well as everything is, you know. But it was great. Just really enjoyed it, you know.
Yeah. So the band were called the Anthology of the Beatles.
It was the Anthology of the Beatles, and so basically we had a John Lennon lookalike, Gary Gibson, and we had a Paul McCartney lookalike, Lawrence Gilmore, and we went out with that sort of idea and it was around the time when the Anthology albums had come out. But it was like, imagine what it would be like if Lennon and McCartney got together, what sort of set they put together. So it was with that sort of loose sort of idea, really. And we were doing theatres and that. But when we did I think we did three weeks in Eilat, and they were good. That was every night, and we were doing stuff like what the Beatles did in from the Hamburg set, you know, and it really also we could be a lot more flexible.
Definitely,
you know.
So do you remember that very first gig with the Beatles, with the Anthology? Was it a big gig? Because
I remember. Yeah.
Go on, you can check these out on YouTube, and we'll put him in the description. There's some pretty big stages that you played on.
Yeah, the first gig I did was the Liverpool convention, and that was for me a little bit daunting because I know that like all your Liverpool fans are there, your Beatle fans are there, and you want to get everything spot on as best you can. So I do remember that. I remember being nervous for that. But then we'd do like sort of festivals, 60s festivals, and all over, like Germany and Denmark and Sweden. Sweden we did a couple of times, and they were good. They were big sort of stages and big sort of like arenas, some of them, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
How did you find the differences between the crowds and from country to country? Is it all quite similar? They're all just sort of screaming at you, or?
Pretty much, yeah. Certainly the Beatles conventions that we've done, that we played at, they were all really, well, they're friendly. Everyone's there. They like that sort of thing. In the 60s, everybody's liking all that sort of vibe, you know. So I thought that you know, and I think especially because if you go abroad, because you've gone to the country, say wherever, they're really welcoming you. Thank you for coming over and all that. So we really got treated really well wherever we went, you know.
I imagine that boosted you as sort of being tight as a musician, because obviously when you're playing in duos, you can put your own spin on things, but when it's the Beatles, it's a tribute, and a big tribute, it's all got to be exact, hasn't it? Was that quite
the
difficult to get right?
Well, we the band that was in then, and subsequently the Rockits, we were all quite. We wanted everything. We tried. We were all aware of each other's parts, so we made a real conscious effort to get our bits as best as we could, you know. So we've always been self-disciplined, like.
Definitely.
I think you have to be. Really.
People watch tributes with a critical eye, don't they? Because you've got to look the part, you've got to sound exactly like it, all the instrumentation's got to be spot on. So it's a tough one, but I imagine very rewarding as well. So obviously, if you go and check those videos out, and the John Lennon tributes and the Paul McCartney's, the voices are just incredibly. Like, how do you like? I mean, obviously you weren't the singer, but to get the voices spot on it's a talent in itself. We had a guest on a couple of weeks ago, and bless her, she said she didn't really like tributes, did she, and stuff. But I think it's actually the talent in it is it's a different ball game, isn't it? But like, to get it spot on, it's some.
Yeah, you've got to really work on the harmonies and get the harmonies right, you know. And there's a lot. I remember a few years ago with the Rockits, not so much with the Anthology of the Beatles, but we did the Beatles convention, and we had to do an album. All the bands that were there had to do an album, either one of the Beatles albums or something by one of the individual, you know. As
the gig, you had to go through the album.
Yes, so we had to recreate the full album. So some people will play McCartney albums, some would do Ringo albums. So we said, this is going to be difficult. So we thought we'd do Hard Day's Night. Can't be that tricky, that, because there's a lot harder albums nowadays. But actually, when we come to sit down and do it and look at all the parts and all the different instruments on it, get every bit right, it took a bit of work, get the harmonies right. And that, it was good to do.
I bet. Yeah.
But to do it right, it's.
Did you find the tone of your instrument had to be bang on as well, or was it not? Were you downloading certain sounds for your keys and stuff like that? Or?
That's part of it, isn't it? Getting the sounds right and things like that. Like we had playing like a classical classical guitar on a couple of songs, and getting the little wood blocks on it, some bongos, and even tuning the bongos, which is probably
Rhodes keyboard sounds and everything.
Yeah, well, yeah, not so much on Hard Day's Night, but certainly some of the later stuff, and that definitely some of that Billy Preston stuff and all that.
Yeah. So talk us through some of those big gigs that you obviously talk about, going to Germany, going to Sweden, going to all these. What's it actually like to stand up on a stage and actually like experience all that? What's going through your head at that point? Are you worried? Do your hands start to go to jelly a bit? What's
when you're waiting to go on? It's like, right, you know, like you're waiting in the wings and you're watching and you're seeing the crowd. And what we used to do is we used to go out if we were on. Later on, we'd always go out in the crowd and get a feel for it, get a good feel for it, you know. But I'd always be nervous, like waiting to go on. That's like the worst part. But once we're on, we'd be on it, like, you know. And then you're worrying about, is the sound going to be right? That was the main concern. Is the sound, because sometimes if the sound was off, it can be a bit off-putting, you know.
I suppose going from gig to gig, you've got a different sound engineer every night as well, haven't you? So with some better than others and that kind of thing, and it's like it's not down to you, I suppose, though, is it? But it's a tricky one.
Some places were, but generally the bigger gigs, when they were set up really well, you know. So once you've got on and once you know your sound, you're comfortable with the sound you have. It was great, just really, we enjoyed it, and then you get through it, and then it goes really quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember doing one gig with a monitor engineer, and that's just the best. Like, that was the best. I've never had a sound as good since. It's like
just your monitor.
Someone was on stage actually just doing the sound check for the monitors and just solely doing that. Yeah. So like, all of a sudden you hear everything. No other gig I've never been able to hear as well again at a gig.
That's it. Yeah.
I'm guessing with those stages you're regularly working with those people.
Absolutely, you just a nod over to the side and they're on it, you know. That's a lot better,
so,
you know.
Obviously, going from gigs like that back into the Cavern, where you maybe don't have that, or smaller clubs, how do you find the transition even to this day?
Well, in Cavern we have an out front engineer, and they're really good. The guys that do the sound. The sound on stage, well, I've started using in-ears now, so my sound's always the same, and it was a bit, at first I wasn't 100%, but I've got used to it now and I like it now, so I've got used to my own sound, you know, at Cavern. But it before that, before lockdown really, we were using the on-stage monitor, and it was just a bit noisy, you know, and a bit noisy. But obviously on the bigger stage, it's not so much noisy, is it? You know, it's just, you hear things nice. But on the smaller stages, if everyone wants to be louder than everybody else, it gets hard work, you know.
100%. So how long did that span for, the Anthology, and how did it sort of end as well?
Well, it kind of fizzled out. I joined the band. Originally, they were called Cavern, really, and the Cavern Beatles are still going, actually. I think I joined in 97. They'd been going well before then. And I think it sort of fizzled out for us in around about 2001, 2002. Gigs got less and less. And then me and the bass player, Chris, we started up doing our own projects, doing... we were doing a duo and a trio at that time for a good few years, and then we started working with a guy, Tony Skeggs, around about early 2000, who I'm working with now at the Cavern. But yeah, so it's sort of like things transition from one thing to another, you know, and that's how it's not like something stopped and then you starting doing something else.
I get you.
Was it like the passion maybe of doing the same thing for 5 years, it just kind of sort of drained out of you in a way? Or
I think so for us, and we were doing sort of less gigs, and so we just, me and Chris, the bass player, we just decided, right, let's carry on, let's keep this, but do more 60s stuff. And we were doing a bit of all sorts, really, in the duo. And then, like I say, we were working with this guy, Tony, in a band called the Hot Dogs, 60s band. And that was through the 2000s. And then around about 2010, that's when Chris and Mikey, the drummer, they formed the Rockits, really, which was a 60s band. So again, that was a sort of transition, and I sort of joined them the year about 2011, something like that. So
we'll move on to the Rockits, because I've been to see the Rockits band a few times. about well over 10 years ago, I'd say. But my granddad liked coming to watch them as well. So to talk about the TV appearances as well as before we move on from the Anthology.
Right.
So the TV stuff, what was that like as an experience? We talked off camera about it was slightly behind with the live as well, wasn't it? So you get to go and watch the live version of it straight after you'd done it.
Yeah, well, we did a few, to be honest. We did the first time I went on TV. We were in Brazil actually. On their TV station, Globo TV, and we didn't know this at the time, and so we thought we were going on to do a radio interview. We didn't even know it was TV.
Oh, wow.
It was just that, like, we didn't sort of understand that it was sort of lost in translation what we were doing. So we turns up at the studio, and it was a selling channel. They were selling John Lennon CDs, you know. But he had a word with the guy who was presenting it, but they'd no piano, and it was like all acoustic, you know. So the drummer were playing bongos, and I had a tambourine, and the bass player had like his sort of acoustic bass and that. And we were selling John Lennon CDs, and we were saying, like, can we not do Imagine? And we were doing stuff like Saw Her Standing There and songs like that. It was really so. That was the first one we did. But we did sort of TFI Friday.
Yeah.
That was good in 1999.
Was that what was on the YouTube as well then?
I think
quite a big
so.
show.
There's
Chris Evans.
There's a few, that's right. Yeah, I think Chris Evans had done some. It was an advert that was going on around the late 90s. If you could have I think it was like a telephone company. If you could have a 1-to-1 with someone and they had different stars on and celebrities again, and. Chris Evans said, if I could have a 1-to-1, it would be with John Lennon. So Gary was doing like the John Lennon sort of part, you know. Right. And he was so like taken aback with him. He invited him on the week after onto the show, and then he would say like, then he invited the whole band on after that. So we did that. But we went down the day before because it was live to run through everything, and you know, because on the stage it was like it was in the round the stage, and there was 3 bands on. And so they moved the audience around, but every band were live, so they had to get the sound right and everything, and get everything right. And then when we did it on the Friday, it was recorded live, but it wasn't broadcast live. It was broadcast about an hour or two after. I think they used to broadcast it live, but someone swore on it. Was it Bez or someone? Someone had swore on it. I think it was Bez.
Surprised me, to be fair.
So they said, right, we can't do it. So, and that was great. So we sort of recorded it, did it. And then afterwards we went across to the pub, you know. Chris Evans came over, and the people there came over and watched it live.
Was that a bit surreal to watch yourself?
Yeah,
that's cool.
Well, it was good. It was just we were just buzzing, you know.
Absolutely.
Did Chris Evans buy you a pint afterwards?
Well, we found out where we were going. We were going to a place in Turk's Head in Kensington, or Knightsbridge, Kensington, I think he went. So we all went to this pub afterwards, and it was just really, really good, you know.
I bet. Yeah. So, is there a lot more that goes into the TV production side of things that you don't even think about when you?
Well, it's surprising actually, because when we got there on the Thursday, we were set up and we did our thing. But they were so busy. They had this. It was Christmas time, 1999, and Chris Evans had this thing that they wanted to do, which was to go outside of the Riverside Studios, and it was like a house basically. And they wanted this lead to come out. It was like a fuse that was going to blow up a Christmas pudding, and they must have spent an hour or two just trying to get the timer down. They couldn't get the timer down because they had to do it in something like 15 seconds. I remember watching them thinking, putting a lot of work into this, and they couldn't get the fuse time to go down in time to blow up this Christmas pudding, so they just ditched it.
And they spent all that time
for like a 30-second segment. They spent ages on it, and they ended up ditching it. So it was interesting to see that sort of thing.
I bet.
When we come to do it on the Friday though, and it sort of runs smoothly because they'd been through it and been through everything, so did sort of record it live. You know.
We definitely encourage you to watch them videos as well, because I couldn't believe the sheer size of the crowd, and they all had the lighters on and stuff, didn't they, with the Anthology?
Oh, there's one in Germany, the Stuttgart one.
Oh, is that,
that's.
And he come out with his like peace jacket on, didn't he, John Lennon? And it was cool. So how did that coincide with your gig with the Monkees then during that time?
So what happened? That I mean, that's going back to like 2000. That really.
So that was all within that same time period, or just a little bit after?
So we're moving ahead now. We're going into the Rockits when we're working with the Rockits. We sort of started our residency at the Cavern in around about 2011, I think it was 2012, 2011, and we were like the resident band on a Friday, and. For Liverpool Beatle Week, they'd bring, they'd always have someone who was related to the Beatles or some big act really to sort of headline it, you know. And the first one I did was about 2014. It was Chris Montez who did Let's Dance, you know, the song Let's Dance, and he always used to tour with Tommy Rowe, and they come over, and there was a band called the Shakers that backed them. But they didn't have a keyboard player, so they asked me, and I did the gig, and it was great. But what the thing with Chris Montez and Tommy Rowe, they always gigged together. But the first time the Beatles went over to America in 1964, I think it was January '64, they were headlining the bill. Chris Montez and Tommy Rowe were headlining the bill, and the Beatles were on second. And then halfway through the tour, the Beatles had got that massive, they had to switch round. So then what happened is Chris Montez and Tommy Rowe came over to England in that summer, and then they were on the same bill as the Beatles. That was like the thing. The
link.
When did you very first gig at the Cavern then? Was that, I'm trying to piece it all together, you know.
Okay, so probably it would be with Hot Dogs. We're going back again in the 2000s, around about 2007 or 8.
Right, so this is after so it was Anthology, then moving on to the Cavern and the Rockits.
Yeah, and before, in between the Anthology, we was in a band called the Hot Dogs with Tony Skeggs, and everyone was still working with now, and then was the Rockits. But throughout that, I was working with Chris, my mate, Chris Grinrod, bass player. Yeah. And we was sort of together, working together throughout that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sort of period, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So was there a bit of a, not a down period, but obviously you'd gone from being in the Anthology, then there was a little bit of a gap then in between the Cavern and the Rockits. Was that a bit of a down period for you, or was there always stuff going on? And
no, there was always stuff going on, always, really.
Yeah.
I mean, when Chris and I, when we'd finished, when we were working with the Anthology anymore, and that basically ended then, really. We sort of wanted to do something else, and we got a duo together, really, and we were sort of putting backing tracks together, and we were sort of wanted to keep it going, you know, sort of thing. And sort of then that's when that transitioned into sort of the Hot Dogs, you know, with Tony Skeggs, who we'd met Tony Skeggs, funnily enough, a few years earlier in Sweden when we were with the Anthology Beatles. So that's there's a lot, you know. So
just before we move on to the next segment, we'll talk more about the experiences in the Cavern and the Rockits and where you've gone from then. What did you get to see? You said you like to travel. Did you get to see a lot of these places you were going to, or was it sort of in and out and you were, you know?
Well, yeah. When we were in Eilat, we stayed there for 3 weeks. We did that twice. That was great. Enjoyed that. We went to Brazil 3 times, well 4 times now, but 3 times in that time, and we were over there for eight nights each time, a couple of gigs each time. Brazil was great. Rio, really enjoyed that. Yeah. But sometimes we'd do gigs sort of. If we were in Sweden, for instance, we get up in the morning, get the first flight out, do the gig at night, and then get the following day the first flight back. Yeah. So you wouldn't really see much of Sweden apart from the airport and the icy roads. You know?
Just feel the weather, that's it.
Yeah, you know. So sometimes for some of them gigs, it excuse me, you wouldn't sort of see much of the country, but.
So were all these bands after the Anthology, were they all sort of covers and 60s stuff,
Yeah.
or is it? Did you ever chuck in a few of your own? Did you ever do a bit of writing, or?
No, not from that point. It was all 60s, all covers and yeah. Pretty much.
Good stuff. Well, should we take a quick break there?
Let's do that.
We don't want to over. Yeah, we'll have a very quick break, and then we'll move on to Justin's experiences with the Cavern and the Rockits moving forward as well, and some of his guitar tuition as well. So see you shortly.
Thank you.
Hello, it's me, Preston's biggest dick, and I'm not talking about my attitude problem. Help! I need somebody! Well, Tony at Timpan Alley Guitars helps. He's very good for your services, setups, part replacement, and much, much more. I've had many of my guitars fixed by Tony, just from his house in his little workshop, and he does a fantastic job. So, to find out more about it, go onto Tony's Facebook page, Tony Helps, or type in Tin Pan Alley Guitars on Facebook, and you will see the range of guitars that Tony has fixed and also put together himself. He also does charity auctions to raffle off guitars that he has fixed up, all for good causes. So, without further ado, go and check him out. Back to the episode.
Right, hello, welcome back to One More Songcast, our third and final part of the episode. So, Justin, we've moved on from the Anthology of the Beatles. Where was your career as a musician? Where did that go after that then?
That's when I started teaching as well.
Yeah.
I was private teaching then I started at a music school in Chorley. And then I was obviously still gigging, predominantly gigging really, right through the 2000s. And then 2010, 2011, that's when I started with the Rockits, and we were doing that. So
Cool. So we'll talk about your teaching a little bit then. So it was a Poco Music, weren't it?
That's
just
where
down
I first
the road.
started. Yeah, Mark and Kath. They were looking for a keyboard teacher and guitar teacher to do grades, and so that's what I was teaching there, which I still am doing. But,
so how did that coincide with your gigs then? Was it quite a smooth transition, or was there a lot of prep and stuff?
I did that sort of weekly. I mean, ideally, it would be Saturdays really, but I said I don't want to teach Saturdays because I'm gigging Friday, Saturday, Sunday as well at that time. So I managed to do it sort of through the week really, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays. Evenings, which really worked well, and then I worked in the shop as well. I did 1 day a week in the shop, which I really enjoyed. That I enjoyed that. Yeah,
nice. I suppose you have a lot of knowledge on equipment and everything, so it was quite smooth for that as well. What were your sales techniques like? That took a while.
Or do you not want to give away your secrets?
Yeah, no secrets really.
So moving on to the Rockits then, or so did it go Cavern then Rockits, or how did that come about?
Yeah, basically we started at the Cavern with the Rockits in 2011. We played at they started doing the Beatles conventions with the Rockits, and Julia Birdsouls, she's one of the directors, John Lennon's sister, Julia Bird. And she saw us and really enjoyed us and sort of wanted us to start playing there on the Fridays. Every Fridays we started doing it first from 2011, and then around about 2014-15 we started doing Sundays at the Cavern Pub across the road, and then we started doing Fridays and Sundays at the Cavern Club. I
bet that was obviously you've had big experiences, but I bet that was quite exciting to get like basically residency or regular gigs there, because it's such a great venue, especially if you're a Beatles lover as well.
It's brilliant, and every night, even now, I mean I've been there 12 years now, it's the audience just hasn't changed at all, we got a bit younger as I've got older, maybe, or maybe it's me getting older.
Do you notice that then? There's still a younger audience coming to watch the Beatles and stuff.
It's surprising. It's like, and they know all the lyrics as well. They're really on it. So it's really got a good vibe.
Yeah, because we fit this, or I fit this. It's like in 20 years' time, what's what's people going to be wanting to listen to in pubs, but it's encouraging to know that there are younger people going to watch Beatles.
Yeah, and obviously influenced by the parents and what they're listening to as well, and that, you know.
Absolutely.
I think Chris Healy said something.
He said there won't be a scene in about 20 years.
But he also said that, like, he said the music from our generation is coming full circle. So you're starting to get a few more guitar bands come through. They're maybe not hitting the charts, but they're on the underside of it, but they're popular enough that kids are going back and listening to sort of like 90s and all that sort of thing. So
it comes down full circle in that respect. Yeah, music does.
So you're fully establishing yourself in the Cavern. How did then the gig with the Monkees come about, and what was that experience like? Yeah,
so what happened is Micky Dolenz, the Monkees were doing a world tour in 2016.
Okay.
And they had a single called You Bring the Summer as well, actually, out, written by Andy Partridge of XTC, brilliant songwriter. And they were on tour, but they had a break in August, which is when the Beatles convention is in Liverpool. So the Cavern booked Micky Dolenz just come down with Wayne Avers, which is the Monkees, like, he's the guitarist, like the musical director, Wayne. Really great guitarist. And so the Cavern booked those to come down, but they wanted a band to back him, really. So they asked us, and we were like thrilled with it. And this was like January before the August. So we did a lot of work with Rockits. We did, getting everything, learning everything. And they said to us, we were in contact like we were, and he said, well, just don't learn the songs as they are. Just learn them as we do them live, because they've changed a bit over the years. They're not. So we had to learn them how they did them live. So we studied like a lot of the videos and that. And then they came over 3 days before. What we did, we played at the Philharmonic. We had a show at the Philharmonic Theatre in Liverpool, and then we had I think it was the Monday. I'm sure it was the Monday. We did a matinee show and then an evening show in the Cavern Live Lounge, which is the back room.
Oh yeah.
And that was the main show. But like 3 days before, Wayne came over, and we spent 3 days in rehearsal.
Nice.
Literally almost full days, really, but certainly long sessions, really. Going through all the set, making sure everything were all right, because a lot of the songs had segues and that. And then on third day, Micky Dolenz came in, like, and we were all like, "Oh, hey, Micky, all right, who's Micky Dolenz?"
Bit in awe of where you were then, yeah.
Well, the funny thing is he's like, nice, so we're all a bit nervous. Like, Wayne's like, these guys are okay, it's all right, they were all right. So the first 3 songs were sort of segued, 1, 2, and 3 without a break, basically. So we're playing and we're nervous, and we're like, so it wasn't like we did one song and then waited to see his reaction. We had to go through this 10-minute time, and then we finished, and Micky Dolenz turned and he goes, "Hey, you guys are pretty good." That sort of really brought the ice. And then we chatted normal, and it was just like being in a rehearsal room with anyone, really.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Wow.
And the gigs were great. They were really, really hot. It was really hot gigs.
So how many gigs did you do with the Monkees, and where were the gigs, did you say?
There was a Philharmonic Theatre, and then we did I think we did 2 shows. We did 2 shows at the Cavern, a matinee and an evening show.
Yeah.
And that was it, really. It was all over the space of a weekend.
Yeah, cool.
The bank holiday at the end of August.
I bet the attendance was pretty big as well.
Yeah, it was absolutely rammed, and it's on YouTube.
Right, okay.
You can
we'll put the link down there for
YouTube.
people to watch as well.
Yeah, the whole gig's on there, and it's quite good, actually.
Wicked.
I think the description of this video is just going to be link after link after link, isn't it?
So was there anything he shared with you that you remember, or any sort of, I don't know, advice or experience that sticks with you, that he obviously you had chats?
Well, we did, yeah. I mean, we had time for a bit of chats. It was Wayne Avers, really, the guitarist. He showed me how to play. What's that one? I can't think. what's the name of the song? I can't think of the name of the song. It's a Monkees song with a really good guitar riff.
Okay, yeah.
Pleasant Valley Sunday, I think it was Pleasant Valley Sunday that's got this like ding.
Right, yeah.
And he was sure because I'd started playing. He says, "No, you play it like this," you know. So it was like little bits like that, which I was really chuffed. And that, but Micky was great, but we didn't really spend a lot of time together because he was staying in the Hard Day's Night, and he literally he couldn't walk down Matthew Street without somebody stopping him all the time. So he kind of tended to stay in his room, really. But the dressing room and that was good.
Did you think when he was showing you these bits, had you sort of sometimes when you're listening to things, it sounds like it's a lot harder than it is. So was it one of those where you'd sort of learnt it the hard way rather than actually it being simple, or was it the other way?
Yeah, funnily enough, when he kind of showed it, because it's a lot of picking, and I thought, that feels easier. That's it feels a lot easier. So I was chuffed about that. But when we were in rehearsals, he was pointing out little bits in songs that were there, and you're thinking, oh yeah, there's that little bit there, and there's especially with keyboard playing, there's a lot of, you might not think it, but there's a lot of keyboard parts in there to remember, there's a lot of little bits to remember.
Absolutely.
And it's not so much the playing or the learning of the parts, it's just remembering, there's a bit here, there's a little brass bit, there's a flute bit here, there's all these little bits that you try to remember. But so it was good that that Wayne was showing us those little bits as well. So
it's like those videos where you watch producers of the songs like take the song apart, and they say, we just did this bit here, and here's the vocals without the double track, and you don't realise what like differences these tiny little bits, these 3-note passages in one section of a song. Yeah. You don't realise what difference it makes and how it fills the song out.
Yeah, it's brilliant. That album show is great. I watched a few of those.
Have you seen some of the Paul McCartney dissections on some of the Beatles songs?
No, I've not seen them. No.
They put it all on basically like a mixing desk, and they bring bits in, and it's like bits you don't even really hear, and there's soloed. It's cool. Yeah, it's wicked. So obviously after that, then the Rockits was formed. So could you talk a little bit about the Rockits? Was it exclusively Beatles? Was it just 60s?
No, I mean we were a 60s band, and I suppose a remit, if you will, not so much a remit, but when we played at the Cavern, it was mainly 60s bands that had played at the Cavern. So you got the Who. Stones, obviously the Beatles, Hollies, all these sort of bands. The Hollies actually went after the Beatles finished their residency. 1963 it was the Hollies that took over the residency after the Beatles.
Right. Oh, I see. After they moved on, right? Yeah.
And we did stuff like I mean, even more modern stuff now. What we're doing now, you've got. You've got Queen, they played down there, and then the Coral, bands like the Coral, Adele's played down there.
You see all the names on the bricks, don't you? For they've played. There's a lot, isn't there?
Every so often,
Monkees I've seen.
Arctic Monkeys played there, 2000 and everywhere.
Yeah, they even get like undiscovered, like I think bands, local bands.
I know Dave Monks does a bit, doesn't he?
Right.
There's someone that runs an open mic on a Monday, religiously every Monday, but you've got to get there really early to get on.
That's at the Cavern Pub, is it?
Yeah, the and then they've got.
Yeah, that's true.
Then Dave Monks from Radio Merseyside, he puts on his favourite bands from the BBC introducing Merseyside as well. When I was in the area, never managed to get on it quite for whatever reason. But a few of my mates have played there, and they just said you don't realise like what that stage is like until you actually get in there. It's just something else.
Yeah. What, the Cavern Club?
The Cavern Club,
the club stage. Yeah, there's two. There's when you go in the front stage is the archway, and then the backstage is the bigger one really. And it's like when they have the bigger bands on. That's where they play in the the events are in the back room. But yeah, it's like certainly the archway. It's a very small sort of it's really you're really on, the audience is on top of you sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it's
it's wicked.
It's an experience.
So with the Rockits, that's sort of how I first heard about you. I remember you being in the suits and stuff like that. So I've noticed you're playing in just local pubs, and then I've seen obviously on YouTube and stuff you've been on quite big stages of the Rockits as well, haven't you?
Yeah, well we went to in 2013 and 2015 we went over to America, it's Abbey Road on the River, it's called, which is the biggest Beatles sort of convention in America.
Right,
it's in Louisville, Kentucky. So we went there in 2013, and there were some big stages there. The main stage there, we played on the main stage there. That was great, and again, the Americans just loved us. Because we're from the UK, really.
Yeah.
And I don't think many they haven't had many UK bands over there at Abbey Road on the River. So we went down an absolute storm, and we were doing like all the Kinks, the Who, the Stones, the Beatles, all that sort of British sort of invasion 60s sort of stuff, and it was great. But we went after we did that, we went on a bit of a road trip. Actually, we went down to Nashville, went through Nashville to the sites, and we also went to. And again, it's only about another 300 miles. We went to Memphis, we went to some studios, and we actually booked a recording session in some studios. Wow. So
what did you record?
Well, we did. We booked it for 2 hours, and it wasn't that expensive with an engineer.
Right,
We just did 2 hours. I think we just blitzed through the set, about 20 songs. We recorded 20 songs, and they recorded it, just sort of analog, or as they would have done.
Yeah. Oh, so it was all done in the old school.
And we did like the post-production back in England, but we actually recorded everything there.
Yeah.
It was an experience, because during the day there, up until about 6 o'clock, it's tourists. Tourists go and you pay so much, and then after 6 o'clock it becomes a working studio. And
so did you go through like an eight? How did that opportunity come up to go around America? Was it just people you knew, or was it an agency?
Yeah, I mean, we were invited by the organisers on Abbey Road on the River. They knew that we were a resident band at the Cavern, and. So that came about, and we did it in 2013, and I did it with it. I think they'd done it a couple of times since, but I went over again in 2015 with them to do it again. And I really enjoyed that, it's good.
So obviously you've been around a lot of places, as we've learned. What is there one particular moment? It might have even been a conversation with somebody, it might have been just a gig. Is it what's the standout thing, if you could look back and go, that was the best moment for me? Like, what would it be?
I think the Micky Dolenz Monkees one, definitely. Because I think we all actually played well as well.
Helps.
We really nailed it, and we all felt good about that gig. If we'd had not felt good about it, it might have been a bit deflating. But that's probably one of the main standout things, and I'm really proud of that. I really enjoyed doing that.
How do you cope with going from these big occasions to then coming and playing locally somewhere? And we'll talk a little bit about yourself. So the Rockits sort of came to an end after lockdown, you were saying, and then you started to branch out into solo work.
Yes.
So obviously you've played in duos and bands all your life. I've been to see you in the Market Ale House before, which you were with your keyboard and mainly guitar. How do you find that solo experience? Me and Lee do a lot of solo work. I've only really ever known just going out on my own. How does that compare, and what are the pros and cons, do you think?
Well, it's certainly learning, and again, it's you. For me, when I'd started doing it, you're going outside your comfort zone. For one thing. And like I say, me and Chris used to do the duo on that, and that's great, because you can bounce off one another, like we were saying earlier. But when you go out on your own, you're like it can be a bit lonely. A
bit more self-conscious maybe as well. Or it's all on you,
everything you do is like autonomous. You choose your songs. You do your best. Touch wood, I've not really had a bad solo gig. But then again, I go out as just doing mainly 60s and that sort of stuff. And I really basically do the set that we did with the Rockits, and we'd honed that set really over years of playing, I stick to that sort of format what we do.
Definitely, yeah.
So, but you're still learning, obviously.
Absolutely, everything's stripped back on your own as well, isn't it? So, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, is it? You know.
Yeah, I think it took me a while to realise actually there's a massive freedom in playing solo, because you can do whatever you want with those songs. If you think, oh, this isn't working, I'll just chuck this one in because that song worked before. You can do it.
Absolutely.
You've actually got so much freedom to take whichever bits of a song you want to and put it in there. So I think off camera you said you preferred being in the band because it was someone to bounce off. Do you find, obviously you've been on the big stages, you're now playing small stages, do you ever get that feeling like when there's no one in the pub, like, oh, what the hell am I doing here? Or do you just think, well, I've been there and done that and just appreciate it for what it is?
No, to be honest, I mean, if there's, I've played a couple of these like little micro pubs up and down, you know. I mean, Market Alehouse is great, you know. Yeah, it's kind of busy that, but sometimes you're doing. There might only be when you first start. There might only be a handful of people, but you've got to, you know, you've got to make the effort to make whoever's in,
definitely,
you know, enjoy it just as. But you've got, when you're on your own, you've got to really. I think, well, obviously you've got to work harder. You know, you have to work harder, but you're consciously sort of thinking, you've got to really, you know, make this work. So even if there's only a few people in, to me, it's you know, you can play big stages, big arenas with thousands of people in. But when you come to play like just with sort of handful of people and you're doing it on your own, you can be just as nervous sometimes, you know.
Probably more sometimes.
But like just going back to like say of the freedom. I mean, I don't use backing tracks now. I'll just go out with acoustic guitar, and for that reason, I feel more comfortable because sometimes if a song's not working, you can change it. You can go into something else. Whereas even with backing tracks, you know, you can't necessarily do that.
You're stuck there for 4 minutes, aren't you?
Yeah. So I do love that freedom to do
Definitely,
that.
Yeah.
You know,
I've noticed that as well because, like, obviously with your help, I'm getting to this. I think yesterday was the first time that I'd done the whole set with acoustic guitar, no other aid.
Brilliant.
And like you say, it's it doesn't feel as awkward because you can slow it down, speed it up, you can change the structure slightly, and it is a lot better, isn't it?
And you're more comfortable.
It's a long road to get there, but it's it's cool. Yeah.
The other thing I was going to ask you is, obviously, now you're solo, you're the front man, you're the singer. You've probably been used to all your life being behind, like being in a backing band. How have you found that transition, like actually having to sing for 45 minutes? Like lead vocals as well.
Well, what we used to do with the Rockits is sometimes I'd go out the front for sort of 20 minutes. I mean, Chris did most of the singing really, but sometimes I'd go out to the front for 20 minutes and I'd pick my songs, you know, pick what I did. So it's kind of, it's not like I've not been at the front of the band. I mean, you know. But it is like you say, for 45, you sort of have to think ahead, and you're constantly thinking ahead of the songs. I find it not challenging. I mean, it's challenging in its way, but it's very interesting, and you've got to be on the ball all the time, you know.
Yeah, because it's not just like the songs you play and the parts you've got to think about. It's not just that and the structures of songs. It's also about, can I push my voice now for the rest of this set, or do I have to hold back on this one? Yeah. And you're picking your songs consciously, actually thinking about your own voice as well.
That's right, yeah. And the gig tomorrow you're going to do.
Yeah, definitely. So, just as we might do a little extra part just to finish up, but so obviously you've been through a lot of different experiences, you've been through a lot of different eras as well. Where do you think the especially from your perspective, the cover scene, where do you think that's going? Where's the pub industry going? Where's the local music industry going? Do you think in 20, because we've had a few people on that have sort of argued that it's sort of dying or it's on its way out. What's your opinion or perspective on stuff like that?
I don't think it'll ever die out. No. I think places evolve. You know, I mean, you can go back to like you're saying about the Lamb days in the 80s, and you can go back to like even when I was 8 years old and my dad were doing the clubs and you know, but it was like, I think the club scene is probably is altering now. And at one time it was all bands who used to play clubs, social clubs and that, you know, and hardly any bands played pubs as such. And it's totally done a 180. You know, there's always, I think there'll always be pubs that will want bands on doing whatever genre of music. I think there always will be. I mean, just walking through, saying before, just walking through Chorley now, how much it's changed, and all these little micro pubs have popped up in the last 10 years. And I'm aware that like there'll always be a space for sort of, you know, someone on acoustic playing just an acoustic set. Now, you know, and I think that's probably how it seems, how it's going at the moment. But I think there'll always be bands will always play. You know, there'll always be the call for that.
Yeah.
You know.
So, playing in a band, sorry Luke, I think it's more like the band gets booked quicker, mainly probably because we play less. So we've got less dates available, but the band was pretty much, we started booking maybe December. We were booked up by the end of January for the year, near enough. We've added about 3 dates.
Well, there you go, yeah. That's
but, you know, there's solo acts, it's constant work coming in. It may just come a bit slower this year, like for whatever reason. But how have you found it? Are you fairly booked ahead, or?
Well, I've sort of relaxed a bit on the solo gigs, to be honest. But I found when I started doing it more solo gigs after lockdown, I found it a bit tricky to get gigs at first because people didn't know which direction, venues didn't know what they wanted and what direction they were going. And I always say it's not like you're a shopkeeper where suddenly your lockdown's in and you can open your doors and comes back. It didn't work like that, you know. It doesn't work like that. But I'm finding it's getting back. It's getting back to more like it was before lockdown. And I'm not doing as many solo gigs now, but that's through choice. But I suppose I could go out and, you know, find the work, because I do see venues all like that. You play. You seem to play a lot of venues.
Yeah, I'm all about, especially around here.
But
like you say, it is a lot of the smaller pubs, the microbreweries. That seems to be the rise at the minute. Sometimes you turn up and it's like playing in a living room, but it's a nice environment and stuff. So yeah, like you say, I don't really do massive venues. But pubs are coming and going all the time.
Yeah, that's another thing, isn't it? You know,
you'll have some sort of residency somewhere, and then that goes, and there's a lot of chopping and changing. But
landlord's changing, and
absolutely.
It's sad that does happen.
Right, we'll take a really short break, and then we'll just talk about what you're doing now, where you're going from here, and we'll do the next part. So yeah, see you shortly. Cheers. Hi, how you doing? It's me, the daddy. Just wanted to take a moment out of the episode to promote a certain somebody today, a certain Steffany Collette that has been helping us out, getting us started with filming, with lighting, with a little bit of photography as well. So big shout out to Steffany. You can find her in Chorley at her studio. It's above the Blue Light Cafe, I believe it is. She does web design, photography, she does filming as well. She does all sorts of things in that sector. And we'd really like to promote her. So her details are going to be in the link in the description below. So you can check her out if you want anything that's music related or even just family shoots she can do as well for you. So a whole range of things. And she's really good. We can vouch for that as well. So go check her out. Back to the episode. I'll see you later. Hello, welcome back to the One More Songcast. So we said the last part was the final part. We were just going to do a little extra. So Justin, what's the plans going forward then? What are you up to at the minute? I know obviously you've got your Cavern residency. You're playing St Anne's a lot.
Yeah, I'm enjoying the Cavern residency. That's going great. You know, we've got a show again in August at the Everyman Theatre, I think, with that band, and it's to do with the Beatles convention as well, and they're celebrating. It's like we're doing not the full album, but we're doing the Beatles Red and Blue album sections of that, because it's 50 years ago since that was released in 1973. So we're working on that at the moment. That's with the band, the Cavern Band. And yeah, Sundays I'm at St Anne's, which I'm really enjoying. It's Hotel, the Dalmini Hotel in St Anne's.
Yeah, I know where it is.
And that's just on the front. We were there last night actually. Nice. And it's a really lovely setting. So it's
do you go inside when it's raining, or do you have like?
No, we're sort of playing in. next to the double doors that lead outside. So it's a lovely setting, and I'm more like sat back playing a bit of jazz piano and a little bit of laid back stuff. And there's a couple of guys.
So I suppose if that's a hotel as well, then it's different audience every week. So it's
there's 4 of us play. Sometimes we're not all there. There's myself, Roy, Tony Benedict, Alan Pell. There's 4 of us as a general core of the band, and the audience is sort of a mixture of regulars and guests in the hotel, and it's good. We start at sort of time we start roughly about 5:30 till about 9:30, something like that. We do about 4 hours. It's good, laid back, and it's
absolutely,
it's
yeah.
I kind of enjoyed that. It's very different. It's like the opposite of the Cavern gigs, but I like that.
So you'd have like a Saturday night at the Cavern, and then Sunday it'd be
a Friday at the Cavern. Saturday might do the odd solo gig or whatever gigs we've got, and so it's different. But I like the diversity of it, really.
For somebody who's not been to the Cavern before, just talk us through that general experience. I've been. You've obviously been as well.
No, I've not.
I've never
actually had the luxury of going.
What's the experience like for somebody that's coming to watch the music? What's it?
Well, I think all the acts that are there, all the bands that are there, really good quality in the solo singers, and the solo. I mean, you've got music on basically from the moment it opens on a Monday, 11 o'clock. I think it opens 11:12 on a Monday. All day through, through to Sunday. So
if you nipped in there now, there'd be something.
If you went on there now, there'd be something on. Whatever time of day you go in, there's always an act on. There's always something on. It's always.
And Matthew Street as a whole is vibrant. There's people on everywhere.
It is. Yeah. I mean, you've got Eric's across the road. That's another famous nightclub. And all the bars and that down there. It is very, very vibrant, and it's always busy. You know, on a Friday night when we're there, I mean, I go about 9 o'clock, and it's busy at 9 o'clock. You know, when I go, there's always people buzzing around. It's a good vibe. You know?
Absolutely.
What's a parking situation like down there?
Well, there's a few streets I can park on. You can park after 6 o'clock. You know, so there's a few streets I know where to park. You know, and again, touch wood, I've not had any problem in 12 years parking. You know, but whether they change that, I don't know. But,
so is there anything that? Is there any gig or any, I don't know, anybody you'd like to... Going forward, is there any plans or aspirations where you think, I'd really love to work on this project, anything that you've seen, or you know, what's your aspirations going forward? Are you just quite happy, content with what you've done and what you're doing, so, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's at the moment, I'm happy with what we're doing, and, you know, with the bands and the people I'm working with at the moment is really good, you know.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, 2 years ago, when we had nothing, really, anyone in the arts industry had nothing, it's like, you know, so to be doing what I'm doing now after 2 years.
Absolutely.
I'm sort of chuffed about it.
Yeah. Did you think that it might not go back to the way it was during lockdown and stuff?
I was a bit despondent.
I think everyone had the
lockdown.
doubts.
I think it was a horrible time, really, and it was just too long, you know. It was just too long, I think, for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely,
you know?
absolutely.
But
good stuff. Right, so we're going to ask you a few quick fires that we ask at the end. They're a little bit, what you call them, sometimes a bit cheesy, but we get some good answers out of them sometimes. Right, okay. So if you could go back to talk to your 16-year-old self, what would you say to him? Maybe it would be something that you would change, or maybe your attitude at that time. What would you say to yourself, do you think? Would you have maybe written music and tried to push original music, maybe, or?
I think I don't know. I think when I was 16, I pretty much knew what I wanted to do.
Yeah,
that's one thing. You know, I certainly was driven in it was just being music, and that's all it was being. I don't know what advice I give to myself.
Well, that's good.
If I'm honest,
it shows that you've done something right. You know?
Well, I don't know if I've done anything right. I don't know, you know. But I'd probably say to myself, you know, keep on at it, you know, enjoying it, which I was anyway, really.
Yeah.
You know, but when I was 16, it was like I was probably just 16, 17 when I first got my first band, so. I'd probably say to myself, make sure you get in a band, and do it, which I did, you know.
What was the best piece of advice you ever actually received?
Keep practicing and stick at it. Because I tell you something, the funny thing is the amount of people I speak to, adults, that say, oh, I used to learn, I used to practice. I practiced piano and guitar, I give it up after 2 years. I wish I hadn't give it up. And there was a moment, actually, probably when I was about 14, I remember my mum said to me, sat me down, she said, you know, it's tough at the moment. She said, you know, if you're finding it tricky, we'll push you, you know, and all that. I said, no, I want to stick at it, and they were behind me then.
Well, that's good.
And it was just a moment. So that's probably the best advice I could give is, you know, especially if you're young. And
I think a lot of parents, especially probably during the 70s and 80s, would have probably been a bit discouraging in music, wouldn't they, really?
Maybe,
so that's good,
but I think it's my brother, or Andy, was always into his music. He was into T-Rex and Status Quo and bands like that, and he was always influenced. So I always had music around me, and of course my dad was, like I say, concert sec, so it was always, music was always in the house. It was always, and it's,
that piece of advice is something similar that my mum and dad give to me, because they always used to say, if you're willing to commit to something, we'll back you. If you're not willing to commit, then it comes away. So it's sort of, in a way, it's putting the responsibility and the onus on you to do it.
Brilliant.
I'd be really interested. It might not be a bit of a non-question, this, but there must have been something pretty cool that John Lennon's sister shared with you. Did she have some cool stories that's probably never been out there before, or not really? Never really had them conversations?
Not really, but she used to come very often in the dressing room, and we'd often chat about things, and well, funnily enough, the second time I went over to America, I took my daughter, who would have been maybe about 14 around about that time, and Julia, she really took to me daughter, you know, because there weren't many kids really there. It was at the festival, you know. So she always asked me about it. She said, I hope Lisa's all right, or you're looking after her well, because she was very motherly like that. She really loved kids and that. So it's always nice when I see Julia. She always asks about my daughter Alicia. So
brilliant. Right, so with your guitar tuition then, so how would people get in touch with you to have guitar lessons?
Well, I'm on Facebook, Justin Crowe. Always get in touch with me on Facebook. I'm currently at the Song Rooms in Chorley. Teaching there, and at a place called Last Act Studios, which is in Formby. That's a performing arts academy, and they're the two sort of schools that I teach at the moment, really, and probably Facebook. I don't do a lot of social media, to be honest. I mean, Facebook, that's it, you know, after MySpace.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have we asked the venues change it? How venues change? Question.
I think a little bit, because we spoke about the like the microbreweries and how that's changing and everything. Sure. I think what you said, I think off camera, it's hard to sometimes remember if it was off camera or on camera, is encouraging as well, is that you are seeing a lot of young people still coming to watch the Beatles tributes and stuff, which bodes well for the future of music and cover music as well.
Yeah, it's not just Beatles, I think music in general, I'd say, you know. I mean, when certainly Matthew Street, with the Cavern, there's a real mixture of people, young and old, you know. And at the moment, we don't just do 60s. We try and do new stuff, like we do sort of Jake Bugg, and because Jake Bugg performed down there, and Arctic Monkees as well. So we do some of that, you know.
Absolutely.
And all that sort of stuff.
So you try and cut. So it's worth saying as well, I actually bumped into somebody. I was doing a solo gig at Chorley Cricket Club, I think it was, and a guy was working behind the bar, and he said, I'm in a Beatles tribute band. I didn't really think anything of it, and I went to check him out afterwards. He gave me a card to say about being a debt potentially and stuff, and I had looked, the Beatles Complete, you listen to them, the young lads, they play at the Cavern quite regularly.
Good
absolutely
lads.
Brilliant.
Yeah, they are.
I was shocked how good they were.
I think they play on Thursdays and Saturdays. I think they are about 16.
And they look like they've got a good following as well, and you know, I think it's quite encouraging to see young lads. They've got the sound off and everything. I thought it were brilliant. So there's plenty out there, isn't there?
Yeah.
How many acts that? Well, you said that it's on all day, isn't it? So there's plenty on, really.
Does it switch every sort of like everyone gets like an hour's, 2 hours slot, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few artists. I'm not sure how many there are. There's quite a few that do down there, and yeah, it's probably, I don't know, maybe they'll do like 2 slots a week, 2 or 3 slots a week, something like that.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, but I always think Beatle Week's amazing. The amount of bands that come over from abroad, and literally everywhere in the world they come from. You know.
Yeah, wicked.
And so.
Good stuff. Is there anything you'd like to add, Justin, that we've missed? We've tried to cover all bases there. I think we've got some pretty cool stories and experiences. Is there anything you'd like to add, or are you all good?
No, I think that's cool. I've really enjoyed it. It's gone quick.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? You sit here and we've probably been here about 2 hours now, haven't we? It does go fast. So
probably about to get a parking fine.
Well, that's the point, actually. Yeah, we better cut it short. No, so big thanks to Justin Crowe for coming on.
Thank you very much.
A jack of all trades in music, which is brilliant. Go and if you're interested in guitar lessons, I can vouch for him because I have guitar lessons with him as well, and he gives you a platform to learn whatever you want to learn. It's, you know, there's no particular grading, you don't have to do anything like that. It's just developing yourself and what you want to develop. So cheers, Justin.
Thank you very much.
And,
thanks.
We'll see you for the next one.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
One more show.